I would like to introduce our speaker this morning, which I am honored to introduce our choir director, Reverend Kathleen Hellenberg. Reverend Kathleen came here with her husband, Gregory. She was convinced to become our choir director. I'm putting it nicely. And has made a difference in our special celebrations and holidays. She's also a part of the Women of Enlightenment, an important part of my life. I was ready to quit because of lack of participation, and she urged me on. And I am very grateful because we've had some wonderful events. Even Friday was a wonderful event. I've come to know her and respect her since my mother's transition last year and on our Wednesdays with Aaron. Please help me welcome to the podium Reverend Kathleen Hellenberg.
Thank you. Hi.
Before you start, I can't help, that little angel is chasing Reverend again.
Yeah. Happy to see him. So it's been a long time since I've been up here. I had to turn down 3 separate invitations to be the speaker because of feeling overwhelmed, worn out, and finally discovering that what I thought was stress was burnout. The best thing to come out of that was reading the book called Burnout, written by twin sisters Emily and Amelia Nagoski. In it, I found what feels like a magic key to emotional healing. The clairvoyant Rudolf Steiner, decades ago, in his lectures and books, described the soul as having 3 faculties: thinking, feeling, and willing, and they are all equally important. That feelings have long had a bad rap because feelings can be unpredictable. Many people often attempt to control their feelings as well as the feelings of others. We are encouraged and even forced to suppress, repress, and even deny our feelings. But if we go along with this, we are not living from our wholeness as we committed to all last year with the theme for the 2022, and we put our health and well-being in jeopardy. An example of this is something I witnessed when I was in my late teens. It was one of the cruelest things I had ever seen. Some members of my family and lots of other friends went to a gathering at a friend's house. He was married and they had a daughter who was maybe about 8 years old at the time, and she was the sweetest, most gentle and kind girl I knew. And at one point, I walked through the dining room on my way to the restroom and came upon a frightening scene. Whew, this makes me cry thinking about it. Taking place between her and her father. She was on one side of the long side of the dining room table, and he was on the other. And he stood with a ruler in his hand. And anytime her lips started to tremble or a tear came close to spilling down her face, he'd say, "Don't you dare," or or moved the hand that held the ruler or started to move toward her. And she'd stiffen up and fight with all her might to not show any emotion whatsoever. I was just horrified. I thought surely her mother would do something to come to her daughter's aid. And when I spoke to her about it, she said, she knows she did wrong and he's the disciplinarian. I'd never been so appalled. Surely whatever this sweet girl had done did not require such sick cruelty. Controlling the emotions of an entire society is shown to the extreme in the movie Equilibrium. It stars Christian Bale, and his character, John Preston, is the highest ranking cleric in a place called Libria. This society came to be after the Third World War, and it was believed that humanity would not be able to survive a fourth. So the survivors believed that the true source of humanity's inhumanity was their ability to feel. In order to prevent people from feeling, a drug, prosium, was developed. It was referred to as the opiate of the masses, the salvation of their society. The drug anesthetized all feelings of a low vibrational frequency, but also all the feelings of a high vibrational frequency. And this sacrifice was seen as what was best for survival. All citizens had to take a dose of the drug at regular intervals. The clerics and the guards had the sole task of seeking out and eradicating those who dared to stop taking this drug, who kept secret stashes of things that had been outlawed, and groups of people who tried to blow up the factories where the drugs were being made. One morning, John accidentally breaks the vial of his morning dose, and before he can get another one, he and his partners must go on a raid. A woman named Mary had been reported as a feeler, the worst crime one could commit. Together with his partner and several officers, they bust into her living quarters, tear down a wall, and find all sorts of colorful and beautiful things. She is arrested, and when John interrogates her, she asks him, "Why are you alive?" I live to safeguard the continuity of this great society, to serve Libria," is his answer. Mary says, "It's circular. You exist to continue your existence. What's the point?" John asks, "What's the point of your existence?" Without hesitation, Mary says, "To feel." Because you've never done it, you can never know it, but it's as vital as breath. John stops taking his prosium. After a while, he, his partner, and a large group of officers go to a building where a large group of sense offenders are holed up. While the others are in a different part of the building, John finds a room that is loaded with contraband. He finds an old phonograph on which is a record of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. He turns the machine on, puts the needle on the record, and continues to look at things in the room as the music plays until suddenly he looks as if he's been punched in the gut. The music moves him so deeply, he sits down and weeps. Up until that point, it seemed John had just been experimenting with what it was like to feel out of curiosity. But now he realizes what Mary meant when she said she exists to feel. And he has to make a conscious decision whether to go back to not feeling or try to hide his feelings and risk exposure. This turning point is a dilemma many face. Do we choose safety at the risk of losing a part of ourselves, or do we continue to feel? When I found out I had burnout, it was at an in-service day in the library where I work part-time. This was at the end of September. The library was closed to the public, And we had a speaker in the morning, then a lunch break, and a different speaker in the afternoon. The topic for the morning was coping with stress and preventing burnout. I was stunned when I realized I had burnout and that it was not just a recent development either, but a lifelong pattern because of the abusive, dysfunctional environment I grew up in. One of my coworkers shared with us that what helped her with burnout was the book that I had mentioned earlier called Burnout. And the subtitle of the book is The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. In 1975, when Herbert Freudenberg first coined the word burnout as a technical term, it was defined by three components. 1, emotional exhaustion. 2, depersonalization. And 3, a decreased sense of accomplishment. In the 40 years since then, research has found it's the first element in burnout, emotional exhaustion, that's most strongly linked to negative impacts on our health, relationships, and work, especially for women. Emotional exhaustion happens when we get stuck in an emotion. There are several reasons for this, and at times we get stuck because we're trapped in a situation or a place where we are not free to move through our feelings till they end of their own accord. Emotions are automatic and instantaneous. They happen everywhere, all of the time, and they affect everything. We can feel many different emotions simultaneously, even in response to only one stimulus. If they are not interrupted or interfered with, they can end on their own. But when they are restricted, suppressed, denied, or not allowed, they cannot end, and they wait for the opportunity to move through what the authors of the Burnout book, the Nagoski sisters, describe as tunnels. They see emotions as tunnels, and if we can go all the way through them, we can get to the light at the end. When Reverend Lisa hosted the All Message Night fundraiser in November, she was able to give only one message during the first half of the evening. When she stepped up to the podium in the second half, she shared that she had been too nervous earlier about making sure everything was in order, as it was her first time hosting such an event. But having calmed down, she was able to receive more messages from Spirit. She had been stuck in the tunnel, stuck in the stress cycle. As she moved through the nervous feeling, she felt freer, and getting to the light at the end of the tunnel, she was more able to open to Spirit. I experienced the image of emotions as tunnels as the magic key to emotional healing. In the healing journey I've been on, I became aware of feeling overwhelmed and unable to move when attempting to do even the most mundane things. With this tunnel image, I became aware of the feeling that there was something in the tunnel that always stepped in front of me, that stopped me in my tracks and wouldn't allow any emotion to move through to the light. I was experiencing the other part of the fight or flight response to stress, which is to freeze. We freeze when our brains perceive the situation we're in as life-threatening, and our best chance of survival is to play dead. When animals have frozen and played dead and survived a life-threatening situation, as soon as they are able to get away to a place of safety, they begin to shake and shudder. All the adrenaline and cortisol built up in their bloodstream gets purged through this process. This shaking and shuddering is something I and many people in support groups I used to attend experienced. We never knew why it happened and found it very uncomfortable, uncontrollable, and at times embarrassing. It's what the sisters call the feels, F-E-E-L-S. The feels are the most important push to get through the tunnel and complete the stress cycle. Emily and Amelia Nagoski wrote that there are so many ways we deny, ignore, or suppress our stress response that most of us are walking around with decades of incomplete stress response cycles, simmering away in our chemistry, just waiting for a chance to be completed and clear out of our systems. In these support groups, we were able to experience the feels because we felt safe enough to talk about traumas we had been through, and we're able to feel ourselves, free ourselves of being frozen and move on through the stress cycle. This can be very scary because it is often accompanied by waves of panic, rage, and shame. But when we don't fight against these waves, they can end on their own as we complete this important part of the stress cycle. When it feels too treacherous to do this on our own, we need someone else, a loving presence, to help us find our way through. That's what I needed, and gratefully, it's what I have. As I read this book, I wrote down on a piece of paper things that I felt could help me move through the stress cycle, with several things listed under each heading, such as color, drink, flower remedies, food, herbs, types of physical movement, semi-precious stones, and others. In the book, it says that simply breathing deeply, especially if you're living with the aftermath of trauma, is the gentlest way to begin unlocking from it. The most important part of doing this is exhaling. Start with a long exhalation, as long as you can make it. When the exhalation is longer than the inhalation, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us to relax and recover. Physical movement and activity is the single most efficient strategy to move through the stress cycle. And this doesn't have to be a big production. As I was typing this, I heard that Time has a new study showing that doing 3 1-minute bursts of physical activity each day that gets our heart rates up can boost our health up to 40% and decrease our risk of cardiovascular disease by up to 48%. Only 3 1-minute bursts of physical activity a day. Other things that can help us move through the stress cycle are having positive social interaction, laughter, affection, crying. I'm really good at crying, by the way. Oh yeah, that's right. I did demonstrate that, didn't I? And creative expression. There is a lot more detail in the book than I was able to share today. And Emily and Amelia also created a burnout workbook that should be coming out sometime this week, I think. So I was really looking forward to getting that. I thought I was going to get that to begin with, but it wasn't available. So I had to read the book. Oh, well, as we become more able to move through the tunnels of our stress cycles, we can fulfill last year's theme of committing to living from our wholeness to transitioning to this year's theme of embracing each new day with hope, courage, and love. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Reverend Kathleen. And Joanne texted that it was a phenomenal